I'm John Heilman.
And I'm Mark Halpern. With all due respect to Lincoln Chafee, Governor, we hardly knew you. Greetings and salutations from the Garrison Coffee House in Clarendon, Iowa, the birthplace of Glenn Miller. We spent the day today with two of the top Republican presidential candidates, including our brand new Iowa poll leader, Dr. Ben Carson, who we interviewed. We'll show you that in a bit. Also on the show, Iowa poll standing switcheroos, JJ dinner previews, and Ted Cruz. But first, Jeb's bad news. On BloombergPolitics.com this morning, our colleague Mike Bender and I first reported that Jeb Bush's campaign is correcting its course and downsizing its staff, making major payroll cuts, sending the candidate to fewer fundraisers, and putting a lot more focus on time in the early voting states, especially New Hampshire and here in Iowa. John, what are the chances that this major change in Jeb Bush's campaign is going to work and revive his candidacy?
Well, there's zero chance that this change is going to revive his candidacy. The only thing that's going to revive his candidacy is finding a message and a compelling rationale that voters like. This might allow him to continue to stay afloat. And we've both seen candidates like John McCain who went through these kinds of things and then went on to be the nominee. But they went on to be the nominee. This is a necessity and not a good thing. It's not the path to winning, but it's the path to staying alive.
It is also a path to getting Jeb Bush in front of voters, not rushing coast to coast to big cities at fundraisers. He could raise all the money in the world, all the king's horses and all the king's men. This gives the campaign a chance to test their theory, which is if voters can talk to Jeb Bush and hear his message, he'll win. And I think even concentrating on the first four states might be too much. I think Iowa and New Hampshire is their path back. And I think right now, because no establishment candidate has caught on, he has a chance.
Well, maybe. But look, I mean, the bottom line is, and we always use this dog is eating the dog food metaphor, you can overspend on dog food, you can underspend on dog food, make it real cheap, but ultimately it's either good dog food or it's bad dog food, right? So maybe you could argue that the problem has been that Jeb's dog food hasn't been distributed well enough or marketed well enough. But in the end, right now, dogs aren't eating it.
What he needs is a morale booster, and making aggressive change, cutting spending will help with the donors, but he needs his staff to feel like this is a winning move. He's going to have to show some successes pretty early. Watch the debate and how aggressive he is next week.
Got to win a couple media cycles. All right, earlier today, we released the latest installment of our Bloomberg Politics Des Moines Register Iowa poll, the Republican horse race. And the result was a total shockaroo. For the first time in more than 100 days, Donald J. Trump, billionaire, was no longer atop the field in the Hawkeye State. That position is now occupied by Ben Carson, who holds a substantial 9-point lead over the Donald, 28 to 19%. We will show you Carson's reaction to that news not that long after he first heard it in a few minutes. But in the meantime, Mark, what are the implications of Ben Carson now being the Iowa frontrunner? And what would it mean if he continued and actually won the caucuses?
There are tons of implications to both the people in politics who are just now thinking through. First of all, Trump now has a choice. Does he want to be behind in Iowa? Does he want to go on TV here, which Carson plans to do with paid media? Right. Or is he content to basically say, Iowa's an evangelical state, Carson can have that, or do I want to go elsewhere? And for somebody like Ted Cruz, who we're going to show the interview with later, what does he do now? Does he go after Carson and think more about Carson voters than he does about Trump voters? And look, if Carson wins Iowa, I think most of the other candidates would say they'd be fine with it. Yes. They continue to underestimate Dr. Carson. They don't believe that he can take an Iowa victory and springboard into future triumphs. They worry that Trump can. I think they might be wrong, but that's their thinking now.
The implications, I think, are pretty clear. They present strategic and tactical challenges for Trump and Cruz that they're going to have to deal with. How do they deal with Iowa? I think if Ben Carson, I'm with the people who think that Ben Carson wins Iowa, he becomes Mike Huckabee, he becomes Rick Santorum. That doesn't give him this, doesn't springboard him to the nomination. I think it's meaningless in the long run.
You just want to keep underestimating.
But I'll
feel free. He's now the Iowa frontrunner.
Until I actually understand what his message is.
How many of the other candidates will go on a book tour and draw 2,000 people at an event? How many others?
Not very many. But like I said, until I actually understand what his message is and what his policies are, I'll continue to underestimate.
The man is the message. All right, the Democrats are flocking.
Or properly estimate him.
The Democrats are flocking east of here to Des Moines this weekend for tomorrow night's annual Jefferson Jackson dinner. The Iowa Democratic Party's annual fundraiser is a huge political event known for its big pregame rallies, its sign wars and celebrations, all leading up to a dinner where Democratic hopefuls face off and sometimes offer some jabs toward their rivals. With all the state party's activists gathered in one place, Big things have been known to happen. This is the dinner where Al Gore and a very joyous Barack Obama both turned their fortunes around on the road to winning the Democratic nomination. So tomorrow, the momentum candidate, Hillary Clinton, will be bringing with her her husband, Bill, and Katy Perry. Yes, Katy Perry as part of her posse.
You mean that Katy Perry?
That Katy Perry. Lincoln Chafee's announcement today that he's dropping out of the race now leaves just two other people joining Hillary Clinton on stage, Martin O'Malley and, of course, her chief rival, Bernie Sanders. John, after Clinton's debate, Biden and Benghazi hearing trifecta of triumphs, how big a deal is this for Bernie Sanders?
It's a pretty big deal, I think, for Bernie Sanders. There's no doubt that there's a sense that Hillary Clinton has turned a corner. She is, as you said, the momentum candidate. I think she'll perform well at this. People forget she performed very well in 2008. The only problem was that Barack Obama performed better in 2008. But he needs, like Jeb Bush, he needs to win a couple cycles here. In the end, more important than this, organizing on the ground in Iowa, but this still matters a lot.
And this dinner helps you organize. I mean, the Gore and Bradley things face off and the Obama-Clinton face off were just huge. I think that Sanders doesn't take big events like this all that seriously. He thinks it's part of the show business of politics. He would rather continue to deliver his message. Frankly, even if he doesn't come in tomorrow night with a brand new speech, which is what Gore did and what Obama did, even if he just comes in with his stump speech and does it well, with the platform and the audience, that could be enough, but he'd be better off, I think, understanding he's got to win this.
His message is now pretty well burned in a lot of places, and what Obama did and Gore did, they not only came in with new speeches, they came in with closing arguments, with the beginning of what they were going to make as their big last argument to win the caucuses.
It's not the end of the world if he doesn't raise his game, but
it's
she's
a
going
big
to come
deal.
in strong.
All right, okay, coming up, Ted Cruz telling us about what it was like to be dissed by his old boss, 43, and he's pleading for a shot at hosting SNL. But first, we met up with Ben Carson today and talked with him about his new status as the Iowa frontrunner, that interview, and what it means for your weekend after these words from our sponsors.
Earlier today, John and I caught up with Dr. Ben Carson. He was in Overland Park, Kansas, on his book tour. His new book out is called A More Perfect Union, What We the People Can Do to Reclaim Our Constitutional Liberties. We began by asking Dr. Carson how it feels now to be the brand new frontrunner in the latest Bloomberg Politics Des Moines Register Iowa poll.
It's much better than being in a different position. But I do realize that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And you know, there will be ups and downs.
We were talking before we started about some of the other candidates who aren't doing as well, and you said something about what your attitude would be if you were down at 2% rather than being the front runner. What did you say?
Well, I would leave, because you know, to me this is really about the people and the will of the people. It's not about a position that I particularly want to ascribe to.
So if you drop down to 2% as a candidate, your attitude would be, why go forward?
Yeah. If other people were polling at much higher and there was a lot more enthusiasm about them, you know, I would say, okay, been nice. Let me go do something worthwhile.
Would you give that advice to the people who are 2% or less?
No, I'm just talking about what I would do.
I figured you'd say that.
Let me ask you a couple questions about Donald Trump, the person who you've just passed in our Iowa poll. He's not attacked you particularly aggressively in this campaign, unlike many of the other candidates who he has attacked pretty aggressively. Do you expect now that you're ahead of him someplace that he's going to start to go after you? And if so, what are you going to do about that?
Well, I guess it really depends on whether he's a gentleman or not. I guess we'll find out. If he does attack me, I will continue to talk about the issues. You know, I just really don't buy into the whole attack your, you know, fellow Republicans thing. I'm just not going to do that.
On the basis of what you've seen so far, do you think Donald Trump is a gentleman?
My personal interactions with him have shown him to be a gentleman. I think there's another element sometimes when he's on camera.
Let me ask you to name two issues where you differ on a matter of substance with Donald Trump, and explain your argument for your side of that position.
One would be on a taxation plan. You know, he feels that a substantial number of people should be excluded from federal taxes, and I do not. I feel that everybody has to have skin in the game. The other thing is on the illegal immigrants. You know, I would give people an opportunity, and it would be a defined period of time, to register and to pay a back tax penalty and to pay taxes going forward if they have a pristine record. And they could be guest workers if they were willing to work in the segment that we designated for them, and that would primarily be segments that Americans don't want to work in.
Right, so that'd be a path to legal status for people who are currently illegally in the country now.
It would be a path to legal status, not a path to citizenship, and not a path to voting rights.
Right, but definitely not deportation like Donald Trump suggests.
I just don't think that's practical, and I also think it would collapse the farming industry in a number of other places.
You just contrasted yourself with Mr. Trump on two important issues. I'm wondering about temperament. And how you contrast yourself with him on temperament.
Well, there's no question that I'm a relatively calm person. A lot of people think that I'm half asleep. I guarantee you I'm awake.
Although you did have trouble remembering what city we were in.
Well, if you were in a different city every day, you might have trouble with that, too.
I want to talk about how your life's changing now, because things are changing. One is the prospect of having Secret Service protection. Most people we've covered who get that, there's obviously an upside to it, and the agents do a great job, and they're great to have around for the obvious reasons. But are you worried about having your life change now, going to a movie, going to a supermarket, going out to dinner?
Yes.
What do you think? How will that affect you and your family?
Well, I mean, everything you do, you have to think in terms of this entourage that's going with you. And, you know, it changes the way that you're able to interact with people. I mean, I like people. My wife is a people person. And, you know, the fact that you can't, you know, interact with people the same way, that's a downside, there's no question. But by the same token, it's probably not all that great to get assassinated either.
How about being guest host on Saturday Night Live? Does that interest you?
No.
Why not?
Because I think the presidency of the United States is a very serious thing, and I don't even want to begin to put it in the light of comedy. Even though I know that the comedians will continue to make fun of me, that's what they do, and that's fine. But they can do that on their own. I will not cooperate.
One of the things that's going to happen as you become a front runner or co-front runner in this race is you're going to get a lot more scrutiny for pretty much everything. Noticed earlier this week in the New York Times, Pete Wehner, who was a former Bush advisor in Bush 43's administration and a kind of prominent conservative intellectual, took you to task for a lot of your analogies related to Nazi Germany and accused you of making imbecilic analogies and saying you didn't really understand the history. How do you respond when someone like Pete Wehner says that about you?
I would say I'd like to have him have that conversation with me in person, and I will show him exactly where he's wrong.
Right, so you've said before, I'll give you one example in this instance where you said that, you know, to try to understand what's going on in Obama's America, people should read Mein Kampf. What do you mean by that?
Well, you understand the philosophy behind the people who want to fundamentally change America. The other book that I said they should read is Rules for Radicals. And as you read these kinds of things, you actually can recognize some of the things that are going on in our society right now.
But just to be clear and specific about this, when you say that there are things that you observe in America today that are like Nazi Germany, what things are you pointing to?
What I actually said is that in Nazi Germany, most of those people did not believe in what Hitler was doing. But did they speak up? Did they say anything? They did not. And my point is, no, we're not like Nazi Germany. And I didn't say that we're like Nazi Germany. I don't want to get there. So what smart people do is they look at tragedies, they look at disasters that have occurred, they look at the inception of those things, and they recognize before they get there that you need to perhaps take corrective action to make sure that you don't get there.
Did you get a chance to read about or watch any of the Benghazi hearing yesterday? And if so,
I did.
What do you think Americans should have learned or did learn from the hearing with Secretary Clinton?
Well, I hope they learned that, you know, immediately after the incident, you know, the emails that she sent to her family and the conversation she had with the Egyptian foreign minister or ambassador were very different than the narrative that was portrayed to the populace.
And what's the significance of that?
The significance to that is that they're prevarication. That's what the significance is. Lying.
But do you think she's qualified to be president of the United States?
No.
Well, why?
Because I believe that she plays fast and loose with the truth. I think judgment also. You know, having a private server and the possibility of compromising the security of our country after having been First Lady for 8 years, a Senator and Secretary of State, if you don't have enough judgment to know better than that, I don't want you with the keys to everything.
You're out selling your book on the Constitution, drawing huge crowds. Are people coming to ask you to sign their books because they love the Constitution and want to learn more about it, or because they love you?
I think a combination of both.
What do you think the odds are you're the next President of the United States?
Well, you know, I'll put it this way. What I used to always tell patients when they would ask me questions like that, well, what's going to happen?
Right.
I would say, why guess when soon you'll know.
Our thanks to Dr. Ben Carson. Again, his new book is called A More Perfect Union, and it's out now. Our interview with Senator Ted Cruz coming up right after this word from our sponsors.
Earlier today, we huddled here in the Garrison Coffee House with Ted Cruz. I started out by asking Cruz about the biggest policy differences he has with Ben Carson.
The biggest difference between me and the other candidates on the Republican side is that I have a consistent record of standing and fighting for conservative principles, of being a fiscal conservative, a social conservative, a national security conservative, and actually walking the walk. So, for example, you know, I've said a lot of times I think Donald Trump's running has been very beneficial for our campaign because it's helped frame the central issue in the primary as who will stand up to Washington. Now, if that's the central issue, the natural next question is who has stood up to Washington? And I can't think of a better question to decide this race because my record is markedly different, standing up not just to Democrats, but leaders in our own party.
Ben Carson has no record of standing up to Washington, I presume is part of what you're saying.
Well, that is one of the marked differences. You know, you go back to 2013, when millions of Americans rose up against the disaster that is Obamacare. I was proud to lead the fight against Obamacare, and of the other 9 candidates on that debate stage, where were they? None of the other 9 stood up and led. In 2014, when millions of conservatives rose up against Obama's illegal executive amnesty, again, I was proud to lead that fight. Again, the other 9 were nowhere to be found. And even going back just a couple of weeks ago to the fight over Planned Parenthood. You know, at the last debate in California, just about every Republican candidate looked in the TV camera and said, we should defund Planned Parenthood. Well, we had a knockdown, drag-out fight in Washington, D.C. Millions of conservatives rose up against Planned Parenthood. Once again, I led the fight. And once again, not a single one of the other candidates was anywhere to be found. It was like they were in witness protection. And that, I think, explains the continued momentum our campaign is getting from the grassroots, is they're looking for someone who can be counted on over and over again.
Jeb Bush is another Texan in a way, and he's well behind you in this Iowa poll, and you've been on the rise, as you said, in a lot of ways. He's retooling his campaign, making major staff cuts, budget cuts. I'm wondering if that surprises you, and if you feel you're on track now to make basically no changes. You've got a plan that's going to take you all the way through Iowa.
Well, we're actually going in the opposite direction, which is we are ramping up. As you know, our campaign, we've seen extraordinary fundraising success. We've had over 360,000 contributions, people all over the country going to tedcruz.org, supporting the campaign.
So on your campaign, no cutbacks, no changes. Your plan is
we're going the opposite direction.
Does it surprise you that Bush has had to make cutbacks?
Well, you know, one of the things we did before we launched the campaign is we studied failed presidential campaigns. And one of the areas they get killed is burn rates. People hemorrhage cash. There's a reason in the last finance report that our campaign reported the most cash on hand of any Republican in the field. $13.8 million in the bank, $3.5 million more than Jeb Bush, which frankly is nuts. I mean, nobody in politics would have predicted that.
So it looks like he failed to learn the lesson that you did.
Well, we focused very much on being lean early on, not spending money early on, saving our resources. We're now deploying them. We're now ramping up. We're opening offices on the ground. We're hiring field staff as we move into the primaries. We've got the grassroots and resources to compete hard in the first 4 states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, but also nationally throughout Super Tuesday.
So the other day, President Bush, former President Bush, made a comment about, he said, of all the Republican candidates, you were the one who bugged him. We've noticed that we think you're a really pleasant guy and really nice to be around. But
you're going to kill me. If reporters are praising me, you're going to tank me in the Republican primaries.
I apologize for that. You can blame us for later. But it seems like a lot of your colleagues in the Senate and some of your colleagues who worked in the Bush administration, you kind of rub them the wrong way. You seem like you don't have a big cheering section in either one of those places. Is that a problem for someone who seeks to be the United States president?
Well, listen, as it concerns President George W. Bush, I like and respect him. And I was proud to work on his campaign, to work in the administration. Nobody is surprised that President Bush is supporting his brother. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that he's attacking candidates that they perceive as a real threat to their campaign.
Well, you're the only one he's attacked, though, so it's not...
Well, that may say something. But what I can say is I'm not going to respond in kind. I will sing his praises. I met my wife, Heidi, working on the George W. Bush campaign. There were 8 marriages came out of that campaign. So, a joke that I've told all over the country, it's a lousy joke. But whatever else anyone says of George W. Bush, in our house, he will always be a uniter and not a divider.
All right. Donald Trump's hosting Saturday Night Live. We talked to Dr. Carson this morning. He said he didn't think it was appropriate for a presidential candidate. Where's Ted Cruz on that important debate?
Look,
if you were asked, would you do it?
I grew up as a Saturday Night Live junkie, and so I love watching it.
If they asked you, would you be on? Would you guest host?
Sure. No, I would be thrilled to do it. Do you have the power to extend that invitation? Now that we could make news.
So
I would love to.
You were guest host to Saturday Night Live. Which famous recurring Saturday Night Live character could you ace? Wild and crazy guy, Conehead, what would you be good at?
Now that is an interesting question. I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of the old Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
When Eddie Murphy was 19, 20 years old, and he's still incredibly talented, but just this young phenom at SNL. I mean, he was hysterical. The problem is, I can actually do quite a few of those riffs, but none of them are appropriate in the world of politics and stuff.
If Lauren Michaels is watching, you're ready.
Look, send me in, Coach. But it's and you know what? I'm sure Donald will do a terrific job. I mean, he has an extraordinary gift, and he's a marvelous entertainer. I think he'll be fabulous.
So Dr. Carson's view that, like, the presidency's serious, we're in very troubled times, he shouldn't be going on a show like that?
Oh, look, I think you should have fun. You should laugh and enjoy yourself. That doesn't stop you from standing up and leading on serious issues, but too many Republicans have taken themselves way too seriously.
Senator, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Our thanks to Ted Cruz, who I think would make a pretty awesome John Belushi. We'll be right back.
Thanks to Garrison Coffee House. We'll see you Monday.
Go Royals, beat those Canadians in sayonara.